Taking a look at the day's headlines. Dirty laundry aired in public, explosive new revelations about U.S. President Donald Trump's private feelings about South Korea's financial commitment to its defense and the original FTA between Seoul and Washington are all exposed in a new tell-all book. What a difference a year makes. It's been exactly 12 months since South Korea's Supreme Court ordered Japanese firms to compensate South Korean victims of wartime forced labor. We look back at how the ruling has affected two-way ties. Plus, African swine fever has been causing chaos in South Korea since it broke out a few weeks ago, and thousands of pigs have been culled, but pork prices are going down rather than up. We'll tell you why. Our top story this morning, a new blockbuster memoir on the first few years of US President Donald Trump's time in office has been published. Writing about the president's rhetoric describing South Korea, the author, who recounts his experiences in the White House, said Trump accused Seoul of being a, quote, major abuser, demanding South Korea pay significantly more for US troops deployed here on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Hyo-sun starts us off.
President Trump has reportedly called for Seoul to pay significantly more in defense costs ever since taking office in early 2017, repeatedly explaining that South Korea is, quote, taking advantage of Washington in the area of defense. This is according to former U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis's speechwriter Guy Snodgrass, who has published a new book titled Holding the Line: Inside Trump's Pentagon with Secretary Mattis. The author states that during the Pentagon's first briefing to Trump in July 2017, the U.S. president called Seoul, quote, a major abuser, even noting it would be a better deal to have South Korea pay at least $60 billion in defense costs annually. This is 12 times the $5 billion that Washington has reportedly brought up during the defense sharing cost negotiation between the two allies. According to the book, Trump also called the previous Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement, quote, criminal during a meeting at the Pentagon. The remarks not only showed Trump's impromptu style, but also his fundamental attitude towards U.S. allies. The author also recalls that Trump caught all his staff off guard when he announced that Seoul, Washington would put a halt to their joint military drills following a Singapore summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Snodgrass said there was no prior notice from the White House, but did not elaborate whether Mattis was also not informed in advance. The book also described that no provocative words like little rocket men were in the initial draft of President Trump's now infamous speech to the UN General Assembly in late 2017, implying there were many last-minute changes made to Trump's remarks. The book also contains other anecdotes from meetings with President Trump and key cabinet members that the author witnessed. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The mother of South Korean President Moon Jae-in died on Tuesday at the age of 92. After quickly wrapping up his official schedule, President Moon rushed to the hospital to bid a final farewell to his mother, who long desired for another reunion with her younger sister in North Korea. Won Jung-hwan reports.
President Moon Jae-in's mother died on Tuesday at a hospital in Busan. Moon and First Lady Kim Jong-suk were present at the time of Kang Han-ok's death, keeping her warm for a couple of hours just before she passed away. This is the first time an incumbent South Korean president has suffered the loss of a parent. Moon's parents were in fact refugees from North Korea who fled their hometown during the Hungnam evacuation in 1950. Kang, a native of Hamhung, South Hamgyong province, is known to be the only member of her family to flee to the south, in doing so losing contact with her younger sister. Back in 2004, when Moon was working at the Blue House, he managed to get her selected for a reunion program, emotionally escorting her mother to meet her long-lost sister. Moon also said he would love to escort his mother to her hometown someday.
돌아가시기 전에 이제 아까 그 함주군 또는 흥남시의 우리 옛날 살던 곳 또는 어머니의 그 우리 외갓집 이런 쪽을 한번 갈 수 있으면 더 소용이 없는 거죠.
In fact, there are still many separated families in South Korea who die without ever seeing their relatives in the north. According to data by the Korean Red Cross, 6 out of 10 South Koreans who applied for reunions have already passed away. Since 1988, nearly 80,000 people who applied for the reunion program have died without realizing their lifelong dream. And it was reported that more than 300 applicants died in the months of September alone. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, exactly 1 year ago today, South Korea's top court in the land ruled that Japanese companies should compensate South Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor of South Koreans. 12 months on, the issue is still far from being settled. In fact, you could say the issue has worsened and spread to other fronts as well. Our Kim Min-ji takes a look at where the two countries stand now and the prospects of one day finding some kind of resolution.
Relations between South Korea and Japan took a turn for the worse following a ruling in October last year by South Korea's Supreme Court, ordering Japanese firms to compensate South Korean victims of forced labor during its colonial rule in the early to mid-20th century.
The plaintiffs are not asking for unpaid wages but are asking for compensation for the illegal actions by Japanese firms. The 1965 State-to-State Treaty on Normalizing Relations does not include compensation for rights violated by Japan's illegal occupation.
Exactly a year has passed, but Japan continues to claim reparation matters were settled through a 1965 accord aimed at normalizing relations between the two sides. What started as a thorny historical dispute soon expanded to trade and security. Japan stripped South Korea of its preferential treatment in export procedures, on top of imposing tougher restrictions on the export of 3 high-tech materials used in the production of chips and displays. Seoul fired back by taking Tokyo off its own trade whitelist and decided to withdraw from a joint military intelligence sharing pact known as JSOMIA once it expires on November 23rd. However, there were efforts along the way to build bridges. Seoul suggested a 1+1 proposal in June, whereby South Korean and Japanese firms voluntarily create a fund to compensate the victims. But Tokyo rebuffed the offer, saying any deal that harms Japanese firms will not be accepted. Also, amid hopes of finding a breakthrough, South Korea's Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon recently had a one-on-one with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo, where they shared the view that further escalation of tensions should be avoided. While the momentum for talks may have been reignited, experts say getting the two countries on the same page will not happen overnight, given their vast differences.
This spat isn't going to be solved in the short term, especially as it's no longer just about the forced labor compensation, but trade and security issues, not to mention negative public sentiment. What's more, unless the Japanese government does away with its claims that reparation issues have been settled under the 1965 deal, there's not much we can do right now. The key will be how to get the Japanese companies involved to voluntarily compensate the victims.
With President Moon Jae-in and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to be under the same roof at a series of international gatherings next month, attention is on whether they will hold a summit on the sidelines and display some sort of political determination toward a resolution. The general consensus is that the issue can no longer be left unaddressed, given that bilateral trust is deteriorating, and there's speculation matters could get even worse after JSOMIA expires. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
From next year, November 15th will likely be designated by the UN as Blue Sky Day, which is the first international day proposed by South Korea. According to South Korea's permanent mission to the UN, Seoul is coordinating with the world body to have the Blue Sky Day designated, as it could enhance global awareness on climate change. All UN member states are known to have primarily agreed to the idea during a closed-door meeting. President Moon Jae-in made the proposal last month during the UN General Assembly. South Korea's inflation rate fell to -0.4% on month in September, the lowest inflation rate out of 40 OECD members, and to-be member countries. According to the OECD's Consumer Price Index released on Wednesday, Seoul's consumer prices for September decreased 2.5% on year. Watchers say stagnant private investment affected the inflation rate, and the Korea Development Institute said the fall in consumer price index is not just caused by supply-side factors, but also because demand has fallen. Now, getting rid of all those cumbersome, power-sapping and often barely, if ever, used apps on our smartphone. Sounds good, right? Well, in South Korea, we may actually be entering a new era where that is a thing. That's because testing has begun on a new banking service, and it launches in South Korea today. The so-called open banking service allows for users to use just one single bank app to do all of their banking, regardless of how many banks they have accounts with. Our Lee Seung-jae has more on how this service works.
Mobile banking saves us the trouble of having to actually go to a brick-and-mortar bank to transfer money or access our account. Having multiple accounts used to mean having to install apps for every bank you have an account with. However, thanks to the latest open banking service being launched in South Korea on Wednesday, bank account holders will only need one app to access all their different bank accounts. So how does it work? Say you have a checking account with Shinhan Bank, but a savings account with Uri Bank. Just the Shinhan Bank app alone will allow you to access your Uri Bank account as well. Along with Shinhan and Uri, a total of 10 banking institutions will take part in the beta test. However, when the service goes live on December 18th, other internet banks such as K-Bank and KakaoBank will utilize the service, as well as fintech companies such as Toss and Naver Pay. Not only will the new service be more convenient, but users will be exempt from transaction fees and receive other benefits.
It offers consumers higher deposit rates and lower loan rates, and when combined with fintech, they can offer a wide range of financial products combined with other technical features.
And with concerns of hacking, the new service has also strengthened security and consumer protection.
Only organizations that have been approved can participate in the open banking system, and only those that have undergone security checks.
Those in the industry are also looking into the possibility of allowing similar services at physical banks for users who have difficulty using mobile banking. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Okay, we're going to start our world news in the United States with the impeachment inquiry still dominating headlines in Washington. A top advisor to President Trump on Ukraine has testified that he was seriously alarmed about U.S. national security after hearing the now infamous phone conversation between Trump and Ukraine's relatively new leader that sparked off all this drama. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Da-mi. So Da-mi, this is the first time really that an official who personally listened to the call has made comments that are not so favorable of President Trump.
Right, Mark. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified on Tuesday that he believes President Trump undermined national security when he asked Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate his political rivals, namely 2020 Democratic candidate Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Testifying behind closed doors to House impeachment investigators on Tuesday, he said he doesn't think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen, and he was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine. Vindman, a veteran and also a Ukraine expert dispatched to the National Security Council last July, is one of the officials along with Vice President Mike Pence who listened in during the phone conversation. The testimony makes him the first current White House official to testify on this subject. It was in fact the second time in less than a month that Vindman had contacted the lead NSC counsel about what he thought were Trump's inappropriate requests. Posting more than 30 tweets and retweets within 2 hours on Tuesday morning, President Trump expressed anger and disgust against the move by so-called never-Trumpers to try and get him impeached. Joshua Wong, one of the most active pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, has been disqualified from running in upcoming district council elections. Local media reported that the Hong Kong government notified Wong in a letter about the ban. Without naming Wong, the Hong Kong government said it had banned a candidate for advocating self-determination for their territory. He was the only candidate to be disqualified. Calling the decision politically driven, Wong said Beijing had clearly exerted great pressure on local officials. A much-anticipated trade agreement between Washington and Beijing may not be ready to be signed in Chile in November as expected. According to Reuters on Tuesday, a U.S. official said the agreement may not happen soon, but that doesn't mean the talks are collapsing. The official added Washington's goal is to sign in Chile, but sometimes texts aren't always ready. He noted progress is being made, and they expect to sign the agreement in South America as planned.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life, whether you're in Korea or somewhere else around the world, with an interest in what's going on here in South Korea. I'm glad to say we have our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung joining us in the studio today. And what we're going to be discussing is pork prices here in South Korea, which have actually fallen in the wake of the African swine fever outbreak that has hit the northern part of the country. So Hae-sung, fill us in on these falling pork prices.
Right, Mark, the first confirmed case of African swine fever in South Korea was on September 17th in Paju. So prices soared immediately, like literally the next day in both wholesale and retail markets. But as of the end of October, prices have fallen in retail markets like supermarkets to about $1.50 per 100 grams. And take a look at this chart. On September 16th, the day before the first case of African swine fever, the pork price was at $1.70 and it soared to near $1.90 as the virus spread across the country. But the trend fell away and the price is now at around $1.50. That's lower than last year's average and average pork prices over the past 5 years.
Well, I am no economic expert, but one might assume that prices would continue to go up if the country is hit with this African swine fever outbreak, much like it has done in China over recent months. We've really seen an explosion in the price there as China tries to deal with its own issue, which is a lot more serious than the outbreak here, of course. Walk us through why exactly then pork prices are falling in South Korea.
Right, so it has to do with demand and supply. So the supply has increased here in Korea as fears of a wider spread of African swine fever diseases led to farmers to release more pigs, more meat into the market. And the South Korean government also carried out this preemptive culling of pigs to contain the spread of the diseases, a total of at least 150,000 livestock. But the thing is, consumer demand for pork has dropped out of concerns that pork contaminated with the virus would be bad for human health. Due to higher supply and lower demand, wholesale prices have dropped by almost $1 to $2.70 per kilogram as of yesterday.
Okay, Hae-sung, we have been talking a lot about African swine fever, the outbreak here in South Korea over the past several weeks, because it's a big story in the country, of course. But for viewers out there who might not have been following the news, can you just tell us what exactly African swine fever is?
Right, so African swine fever is a hemorrhagic disease. It's a fever that's lethal to pigs. And it originated in Africa, and it's been known for about 100 years. Then it appeared in Europe, and the first case took place in Asia last year, August 2018 in China. Then it spread across 10 Asian countries, including South Korea, North Korea, and Vietnam and Mongolia and other countries. But then, while it's been known to exist for about 100 years, there has been no research showing pigs with the virus poses a health risk to humans. At a government briefing last Friday, South Korea's Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs Kim Hyun-soo cited research from the World Organization for Animal Health that only pigs get African swine fever virus and it can't affect humans to allay consumer concerns. But still, consumers are concerned. Take a listen.
I am worried, even though government authorities say contaminated pork poses no harm to humans. It could be that there's no research on the effect yet. So I don't plan to eat pork for about a year. The piglets from the cull pigs could have the virus too, so I am concerned.
Reports say it's okay to eat swine flu-contaminated pork as long as it is cooked or boiled, but I'm still worried, so I'm choosing other kinds of meat instead.
A survey by Korea Rural Economic Institute shows 1 out of 2 Korean consumers are concerned about the safety of pork. And as a result of falling demand, pork sales between October 1st and 28th dropped around 13% on year at E-Mart. Sales of beef jumped 20% on year on the other hand, and chicken also went up slightly.
And Hae-sung, what's the price outlook heading forward then? Do we still expect the prices to stay on their downward trend?
It's hard to say, Mark. So first, look at China, which consumes about half of the world's pork. So prices have soared about 150% on year in October as supply of pork has dropped by a third over the past year. And due to the shortage of pork, actually the South China Morning Post actually said people are consuming dog or rabbit meat as substitutes. And in the Philippines, the disease led to a monthly loss of $20 million as authorities had to cull more pigs. At the end of the day, pork prices in South Korea depend on whether the diseases can be contained in the northern parts of the country to allay consumer concerns. And if we see the culled pork floating in the market goes down, then the supply and to demand ratio would stabilize, helping prices to stabilize as well. Just to note, a total of 16 cases have been confirmed so far, including one just yesterday.
Okay, one new case was confirmed on Tuesday, so this outbreak is not over yet, unfortunately. A lot of people thinking it's better to be safe rather than sorry and are therefore avoiding pork for now, and that's what's bringing the price down as well as the oversupply of this meat. As always, Hae-sung, thank you very much for your information today.
My pleasure.
Good morning. I hope you're dressed warmly for your Wednesday morning as it was noticeably chilly. Parts of Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces saw morning lows plunging below zero this morning, and a cold wave advisory was issued for mountainous parts of Gangwon-do province. However, the chill should ease this afternoon under plenty of sunshine, so do expect big temperature differences there. And readings will be higher than normal for the next few days, so beware of those temperature fluctuations and dress accordingly. Daily highs will rise into the upper teens in most regions by this afternoon, and top temperatures will range between 17 and 20 degrees Celsius, and the air quality will be normal to good for the entire country thanks to the chilly winds. We will see sunny skies for the next 5 days across many regions, but beware of the roller coaster temperatures and take good care of yourself as many are coming down with colds. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time in around 90 minutes from now. So until then, goodbye.
Emerging Innovators aims to strengthen the manufacturing competitiveness of Korean